without a doubt, the hardest, most challenging time of my life to date, have become the greatest source of light and energy and happiness, and have kind of given me so much. It's all about perspective, really, isn't it? I mean, we have an opportunity to create our own happiness.
Agi is a certified professional coach, working as an executive coach and workshop facilitator through her company Westbourne Associates. She works with rising talent, high achievers and leaders, and the coaches who support them, to help them stay energized, positive and resilient, elevating their performance and results even in times of high stress and big change. Agi is also the author of the new book, Generation Panic, sharing simple and empowering techniques to combat anxiety. Agi was also my very first coach when I was in the process of exiting my fashion business consulting company and moving towards getting my own coaching certification and aligning with my values and purpose. I always hold her and the work we have done together close to my heart and look forward to working with her again. In this episode, we talk about how Agi progressed quickly in financial services and corporate, but her body started reacting with anxiety and panic attacks. She found that books didn't have the techniques she needed, and so she explored tools that worked for her, which she now is sharing with the world in her new book, Generation Panic. You're listening to Going Conscious, the podcast where we discover new ways to live a more conscious life of fulfillment and freedom. Each week, I speak with entrepreneurs, academics, and changemakers who have made big transformations, left unfulfilling lives behind, and found meaning in this new world where purpose drives success. Let's get inspired to live our unique journeys to the fullest. Let's explore the impact we want to make and deepen our understanding of ourselves, each other, and this beautiful world around us. Live your freedom. I'm your host, Nikki Trott. In this episode, we talk about how your body gives you messages and it's up to you if you listen to them or not. How much of our panic comes from comparison with others. Specific tools for anxiety, including how to use breathwork, Agi's 777 technique, and heartbeat tapping. Why children are the best examples for us to learn from. The relationship between your head and your heart. The power of gratitude. The highs and lows of writing a book, and the privilege of helping other people succeed. Now let's go to our conversation. Agi, hello and welcome to Going Conscious.
Hi there, how are you, Nikki?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm excited to speak to you and find out more about your book, which you just launched, which is so exciting.
Thank you. Yes, it's been quad the whirlwind. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've heard that the work starts once you finish writing the book. Are you finding that?
Yes, which I didn't realise. I think I probably went into it very green, and I'm definitely learning that as we speak, for sure. Yes.
So how's it going? What is the kind of work that you're now dealing with, all of the busyness that's come from the book launch that you might not have expected?
Great question. Well, first thing first, in really good news, it's sold out on the first weekend of being published in the UK. But that in itself has spat out a whole host of crazy kind of distribution issues with trying to get it into the hands of people, and the joys of Amazon and Waterstones giving horrible automatic responses saying your book's been refunded or not able to be delivered. So trying to work with the publisher and Wiley distributor, things like that. And then obviously doing wonderful things like this and talking to you and articles. And I mean, it never ends. Let alone, actually, the most exciting thing I've done recently is I asked a number of people who were the most kind of daring and wild people they could think of. And I would send a book to them, kind of no questions asked. So I've been scribing books to the Obamas, Prince William and Kate Middleton, Princess, Ellen, I can't even remember who the rest were, a whole host of different people. So yes, it's been a busy few weeks, but very, very energizing, very exciting.
Wow, incredible. Well, congratulations on the selling out. It sounds like a good problem to have.
Thank you. Yes, it is. It was hard to see it like that in the beginning, but yes, a good example of reframing.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, I've absolutely loved reading it myself, Generation Panic. And I found I haven't actually personally really suffered from anxiety. I think probably everybody has some anxiety that they experience in their life. But I haven't really suffered from it, but I still found loads of the tools were really relevant and really, really useful. So I thought that was really interesting. And I'm really looking forward to asking you about some of those specifically as well. But first, I wanted to talk about your own experience, because I know that you talk about in the book about your story and you went through your own experience and from working in financial services to finding your purpose as an executive coach. And I'd love to find out just a little bit about how your experience really became the basis for this book.
Yes, absolutely. So to rewind slightly, I came out of university fresh-faced and bushy-tailed, and was lucky enough to find a role in financial services recruitment. Which, long story short, I've kind of grown up and or grew up with the companies, got headhunted to another one, into a startup, and progressed very, very quickly. So I was a very young director with 3 teams, a top biller, earning lots of money, engaged to be married, tick, 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 tick. You know, on the surface, everything looked great. And ultimately, behind the scenes, I was a complete wreck. And I was incredibly anxious, and I was starting to have panic attacks because I think my body was just taking over and reacting. And I was quite frankly terrified. I had no idea what was happening to me. I was so embarrassed that I was struggling so much, but also desperate to try and uphold my, I don't know, the image of myself, that I could hold it all together, that I could still lead these teams and all the rest of it. So, yeah, it was a very, very challenging and scary time. But from that, obviously, Generation Panic, the book, has been born. It was intense. So initially, I tried anything and everything that I could get my hands on. So I was reading books, and I think that was one of my frustrations. That I'd read 350 pages and it would have like one technique at the end of it. And I was like, oh, what else can I get? That doesn't work for me, or it hasn't resonated, and I need or want something more. And people were just kind of giving me the same advice, saying, oh, you know, check out a meditation app or do some yoga. And for me, I'd sit there and go, oh my gosh, I just can't quiet my brain, or I can't even sit still that long. It's just too stressful. So I just started exploring like all of these different weird and wonderful things that work for me. And one of the chapters actually in the book is called Happy, Healthy You, which talks about really fundamental, very obvious things, such as getting enough sleep and cutting out caffeine, which was the time I cut caffeine out of I stopped drinking coffee. And tried to do some good exercise and made sure I was much more aware of what I was putting in my body. And all of those little things that sound small and like they wouldn't make a huge difference actually had a really profound impact. So yeah, I really scaled back. I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I ate better meals, I tried to get as much sleep as I could, cut out coffee, and just slowly but surely I got myself back on track, and with a whole host of other things. But yeah, that was where I kind of started.
Amazing. So you really took things into your own hands and experienced this yourself and created your own healing so you could then share it with others in the future. I suppose without knowing that at the time, of course, but really,
Yeah.
you know, you created your own handbook for dealing with this issue, which is so common for so many people. And you know, I enjoyed that chapter that you just referred to, and I found that those things also were so important for me as well. And like I said, okay, anxiety wasn't something I was specifically addressing myself, but quitting caffeine, quitting alcohol, eating more and more healthily, moving my body more has completely changed my whole life. And I know those things are the most obvious things that we're always told. And I definitely heard those things so many times. And sleep, sorry, of course, sleep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to be one of those people who just thought, well, I can absolutely function on 4 hours. So that's fine. Not every night, but, you know, I was definitely burning the candle at both ends and didn't think there was any issue with it until I read that book, Why We Sleep, as well. And just really understood, actually, this is the most important thing to our health. And it's incredible that I think, you know, sometimes we feel like we're fine, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
there isn't necessarily a huge problem, right? So, I mean, what you described was you went to such an extreme point where you had this huge pressure and responsibility and big job at a young age, and it was probably not what you were meant to be doing truly, and just too much, you know, and it became really hard to handle. But there's such a spectrum, isn't there, where everybody always has things that they could improve, that could make them feel even better, even if you already feel pretty good. And I think that that's also something that's interesting to think about. You know, do you have a massive anxiety problem? Maybe, or maybe not. But either way, there's so much that we can do and so many things we can use to just keep improving.
Yes, all completely valid points, and also important that you don't need to wait for a complete, meltdown and be having
Exactly.
panic attacks to make these really important changes that can fundamentally change how happy you are and how much you feel on the front foot rather than the back foot. They really are critical, and when you go down to such a small level, they all add up. And that's only one chapter of the entire book. So,
of course, yes.
you know, it's you really are a kind of whole person with all these amazing, different, wonderful parts that come together, and all of them need to be kind of looked at in unison with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you talked about your body taking over as well, and how, you know, in the end, your body is going to show you what you need. And it's kind of up to you how far you let that go, isn't it?
Yes, and I had essentially been ignoring all of its messages up until that point and just tried to rationalize in my head, going, obviously I'm completely fine and I can completely handle all this pressure and I've got everything under control. And I just got to such a breaking point that my body ultimately had no other option other than to give me a full-blown panic attack, to realize how serious it was, and that I actually really did need to stop and reassess and look at things more broadly.
Yeah. So you explain this in the book, but can you tell us a bit about why so many people, especially in their 20s and 30s, are suffering from anxiety and panic right now?
Oh, well, right now, I mean, it's different even from when I first wrote it.
That's true.
So when I first wrote it,
In general.
the group of people that I specifically wrote this for was Generation Panic. So people in their 20s and 30s who are young professionals, brilliant, high achievers, driven, focused, all the rest of it. And yet there's so much that we're having to keep up with. You know, if you think, Nikki and I, you and I, we're in the same age gap. And within our friendship group, I've got friends who are incredibly single to people who are, have kids and are divorced, or people who are just starting out in their careers or changing careers or traveling or owning property to not, there's just so much change. There's so much flux. And everyone, I think, is desperate to keep up, and we're all just looking at each other going, oh my god, is the grass greener, and how come they've got everything sorted and I'm the only one struggling? And I think that just creates this little bubble of anxiety. However, the thing that I will say is that, having obviously published in today's times with everything that's been happening in the last 18 months in the world, the question that I keep getting again and again is Generation Panic solely for that, that group of people that I've just described? And it's really not, because I think Generation Panic as a book in itself is so applicable to everyone. I mean, you've read it now, you can see that the tools aren't specifically in a workplace, for example. They are to be applied to everyday life. And the more I speak to people and hear about their own stories, I've spoken to teenagers up to 70-year-olds who struggle with anxiety and have are facing challenges on a daily basis. So I think it's really everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. People might just call it different things, coin different phrases to it, but everyone has stress. Everyone has things that make them feel not 100%, and that to me is can be defined as anxiety.
Yes, yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, seems very timely for the
Yeah.
book to be put out in the world. And one of the tools that you share is around using your breath. I love breath work and just find it so incredibly powerful. And I think it's really often underestimated, a tool that we all have at our disposal, but don't necessarily know how to use in the best way. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the power of the breath and also what you've called the most powerful tool in your box, the 777.
Yes. So you're right. Breathing is with you absolutely everywhere, which sounds so obvious. But I think we forget that. And often, even now, when I find myself getting tighter or feeling anxious about something, I've ultimately forgotten to breathe. I've forgotten to take true, deep belly breaths right into the kind of pit of your tummy, to feel calmer, and as though whatever's going to come your way, you're able to handle it. And there's just, as I'm sure you know, there's been tons and tons of research around the power of your breath and how it really does impact not only your heart rate, but how clear your head's feeling, for example, or how calm you're feeling. So the work is really profound. And the specific technique that I talk about here is, you can start with any level that you feel comfortable with, because I absolutely did not start with 777. But essentially the principle is breathe in for 7 counts, hold for 7 counts, and breathe out for 7 counts. And as much as you can push your air beyond your kind of chest space, right down into the pit of your stomach. Imagine that your tummy is like a cave, and it's got lots of kind of dark nooks and crannies, and you want to be pushing fresh, clean, pure air into those places and taking out all that kind of stale, unwanted air. But when I first started, I would just breathe in for 2 counts, hold for 2 counts, and exhale for 2 counts. So I hope for your listeners, they can just find what works for them and build up their strength as they go. And yes, always remember to breathe. I do it now all the time before any big meeting, pitch, facilitation, a big client. I will absolutely take time to do some deep, deep breathing.
Amazing. That's so simple and easy to remember.
Yeah.
And I love how you explain as well that you can really change it to 2 or 7, and you can even make it 10 one day maybe, and really make it your own where you are. But, everyone can access the power of their breath immediately with that. I love it. And it's there's so much about breathwork that we still don't know. And I interviewed Richard Blake, who as well, I think. And he talks in one of our episodes about how he's actually going now to do a PhD in breathwork, which he's now started, to find out more about the benefits of it, because there's no money in it. It's not funded by a pharmaceutical company. We've all got it already within us. So there's so much that we still don't know about the power of our breath, which I just found so magical.
And I think that world is going to be endless, isn't it? Just the research side of it. But I see it time and time again with all of my clients, is that it's just so high. And you know that feeling when things just get tighter in your chest and it's right up here and everything's just so tight and kind of sprung up. And so how can you change that? Just so everything kind of relaxes into where it's meant to be, rather than something that's like a spring.
Yeah, exactly. One of my other breathwork facilitator friends who I've also interviewed, Sasha, he always talks about how when you see a baby breathing, they breathe with their whole body. And then by the time we're adults, the way that we have come to breathe in our Western society, at least, is so shallow. And once we start practicing with techniques like the one that you just shared with us, we can really start to open up the way we breathe in general. And it completely changes our physiology.
Do you know what? Children are absolutely the best people to be learning off in all respects, like movement, breathing, how they approach challenging situations. They're just fascinating. And I completely agree. Breathing is such a good example with children of how they do it so well. And also it's a good reminder for us as parents or adults in the world that, like our children, we can take baby steps and just try a small thing and see what works, and then change it if it's not, or keep doing it or enhance it if it's going really well. But yes, kids are our greatest teachers, I think, in many ways.
I love that. That's beautiful and so true, and such a good reminder. Yes. Oh, that would be a whole other podcast to talk about that topic.
Exactly.
But it is amazing how attitudes are shifting so much with conscious parenting and various different ideas around how, people are starting to see their own child as their guru, really, their greatest teacher, instead of just being that strict parent who has so much knowledge to put down onto their child. And, it's beautiful. I love that flip. I would love to talk about tapping. So I've heard people talking about tapping, and I have had no idea what it is. And then in your book, I read about heartbeat tapping. I presume it's the same thing that people mean when they just say tapping. And I found that really fascinating. And I'd love to find out a bit more if you could tell us about what tapping is and how we can use it.
So it's actually different from, So I've had tapping, and tapping's a really interesting, actually you should try it out. I found it a very interesting experience. I remember sat in a park and you kind of touch upon different points on your body and tap whilst repeating phrases, which is very interesting. But this is actually different. So the heartbeat tapper is, again, it's kind of linked to the breath in really thinking about how we can control our heart rate. Because if we can control our heart rate, we can send messages to the rest of the body that we're okay. And because when we're not okay and we feel as though we're under threat, our heart rate obviously skyrockets. When we're having a panic attack or we're feeling incredibly anxious, that fight, flight, freeze response kicks in, and all of those like concoctions of hormones like cortisol and adrenaline go, and our heart like goes bonkers. Well, it did for me anyway. But I like to think of the heart almost like a captain of a ship. And so if the captain is in control and can think clearly and calmly, then it can ultimately control the direction or the speed or the rhythm of where the ship is going. And so out of the metaphor, if you can control your heart rate, you can lower your anxiety levels and just feel much better. And so this technique is just having your wrist, your palm facing the ceiling and putting two fingers, almost so you're checking someone's heartbeat or heart rate if they're unwell in some way, and just up and down tapping to a rhythm that is slower than your heart rate. Because, well, for me, I always found when I was anxious, my heart rate would get very quick. And so if I just slowed things down a little bit and did the heartbeat tapper at a rhythmic, slow, peaceful rate, actually, as soon as my attention and energy was focused on the tapping and that slower rhythm, it just calmed everything else down. And then ultimately made me feel better. It made me feel more in control. So yes. And the other thing that I really like about this technique is, similarly to your breathing, you're not having to do anything crazy. I mean, you can do this under a table wherever you are, whether you're at a coffee shop or you're in a meeting room or you're, I don't know, whatever you're doing, you can do this with no one really having an idea. And that in itself, I think, is quite powerful.
Amazing. Wow. It makes so much sense. And I didn't know that you can actually change your heartbeat by tapping a different rhythm on your wrist. That's beautiful. And I love it. Like you say, it's so simple. Anyone can do it anywhere.
Yeah, we'll give it a shot. See how you get on.
I will. I'll let you know. I'll report back. Definitely.
Exactly. Yes, it's very simple. Very, very simple.
Amazing. And talking of the heart, in the book, you talk about the heart and the head and the kind of relationship between the two. And I'd love firstly for you just to tell our listeners a little bit about that. But then I was wondering, because I talk a lot about intuition and the importance about intuition, and I think of that more as the gut. But there's so much crossover. Maybe, the heart and the gut, I think often we are talking about the same thing, but just using one or the other. So I was wondering how intuition kind of fits in for you into that picture.
I think it can fit in any way that you like. Interestingly for me, I feel like they're kind of different.
If you enjoy Going Conscious, please subscribe for a new episode every Wednesday. If you think your friends and networks would benefit from listening, please share this podcast of fulfillment and freedom with them. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. It's great to read what you think, and your support makes a big difference. Together, let's grow our courage and tools to transform and live the lives we really want to. As well as creating Going Conscious, I work as a transformation coach and conscious brand consultant. I'm on a mission to help holistically maximize conscious entrepreneurs to drive positive changes for themselves, others, and the planet. I can help you to transition and level up personally, and I can help your brand grow and make a bigger impact. To connect with me and find out more about how we can work together, find me on Instagram @NikkiTrott or on my website nikkitrott.com. Please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and let's talk about your path of growth and development.
I feel like my intuition, my gut instinct is like the part of me that can make decisions without really thinking, or just kind of feels like it knows the way or knows the path. Do you know that feeling? You're just like, oh,
Absolutely.
my gut's just like, yeah, it's clear. Whereas the head and the heart, well, the head part is definitely the part of you that kind of tells you all the stories, like rationalize everything, understands how we're feeling and acting. Whereas the heart is more like your soul, as in like what's really going on. What's the part of you that what is the kind of broader part of you needing, rather than just like the part that can tell you the right or the wrong way to go ahead. Does that make sense? I explain that one.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I think the mind also can bring in a lot of fear, can't it? Sometimes, which can really cloud what we might be knowing in our body, and kind of, feeling actually that we know that something's the right thing, and then the mind jumps in with all the reasons why it might not be. And sometimes there's a bit of a battle between the two. And I'm sure we've all experienced when you follow the head part and realize that you made the wrong decision and you knew all along.
Yes. And you're completely right when they're out of sync with one another. And I think that's ultimately why I had a panic attack. But also, I think in the book I use an example about public speaking. And in my head, I can totally rationalize it. I'm like, it's just a 10-minute speech. I know what I'm talking about. I can picture them naked in the bath. I know I'm going to get through it. It might not be the best or the worst, but in my heart, I'm like, oh, I just don't want to be on stage on my own, or I'm so worried what they're going to think about me, or whatever. That's a very different emotion. And when I think of the head and the heart, I picture this bird. And you kind of need both sides to be balanced. Otherwise, if one side, as in, well, for me particularly, my head is working in overtime, then that wing is just going to fly me in circles. And so it's even now, like a conscious effort to be like, how can I incorporate both sides? How can I make sure that both wings of the bird are flying, and so that it's just a bit easier and freer? And yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And that alignment then really leads to the flow, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all, with all of the tools and techniques in the book, it's just like trying them out and seeing how they work. And if they don't work or it doesn't resonate, then try something else. And actually, if it feels right for you then at that moment, great, implement it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like anything. It's just like, I don't know, making pizza. You just decide like which toppings you want and taste test and I don't know, change all the settings as you want.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not at all static either. That will change all the time throughout the different phases of your life.
Oh, absolutely. I have that even now. I often get asked what my favorite technique is or what's my kind of go-to. And breathing is a pretty consistent one. It's something that I always need to remember to do properly. But aside from that, I think everything changes. Like I'll come back to the book and I'm like, oh yeah, that was such a good technique. Or, oh, this, what I'm struggling with now is so different, or I need something else. And that's the beauty of it. It's like all these things in one place, so you can just dip in and out to find it, ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Beautiful. It's something you can just keep coming back to.
Yes. Hopefully. That's my kind of greatest hope for the book, is that people will have them by their bedside tables, and just they'll be well thumbed and well loved, and lots of sticky post-it notes and nice scribbles in the aisles or in the margins. And they'll just come back to it and again, like, I've got a big meeting today, or I have a call with a friend, or I'm, getting in touch with X and I'm just going to have a refresher. That's the kind of, that would be goal number one.
Yeah, I can see that definitely. I mean, there's so many different things packed in there. And there's the section Learn to Love It. I think that this quite nicely brings us onto there, because I'm just going to read a very short extract. We can create our own misery, and we can also create our own happiness by choice. We have the opportunity to shape our lives by deciding how we want to feel. So really powerful words there about how we can really use our own mindset to completely change the way that we're experiencing life. Would love for you to tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, absolutely. And this is something that I have, initially I really struggled with in the moment, because I was just so mortified that I was struggling so much. Yet, if with the benefit of hindsight, those darkest, without a doubt, the hardest, most challenging time of my life to date have become the greatest source of light and energy and happiness, and have kind of given me so much. It's all about perspective, really, isn't it? I mean, we all face challenges. Obviously the last year has been crazy, and we have an opportunity to create our own happiness. I heard someone the other day who just, who threw the question out of saying, what if I just enjoyed this? So like, whatever's happening, however hard, like, what if I just enjoyed this? And I was like, I love that. I should have put that in the book. That'd be in version 2. But, Learn to Love It, a very interesting concept. How we can embrace those parts that, at first glance for me, I was so, I wanted to kind of hide away. And actually how I now deal with it and speak about it and have learned to love it, the better.
Amazing. That's so beautiful how you describe how the hardest parts of your life have become your greatest sources of energy and light. And with hindsight, because it's so hard to see that, isn't it, when you're really going through something. But then later, if you really open up to the rewards that can come from that, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also we can spend so much time fighting something, and actually as soon as we just like sit back and be like, oh, you're here, that's a good thing. Let's just embrace it. And actually, even now, if I start to feel anxious, I'm like, this is like great. I get wonderful communication about what's going on in broader life. Like some of the things we've already discussed, like how's my body feeling, or what's happening in my head and my heart, or how's my breath doing? It's great feedback. And if I'm feeling anxious about something now, I try and flip it into something positive so that it actually motivates me to do something rather than paralyzes me. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Sounds simple, but also really hard. But it just takes practice, I guess. Is that what you found?
Yeah. Practice. Practice makes perfect for sure. Practice. But I also think, a number of other things which might seem obvious, but working with the right people, whether you've got coaches, therapists, mentors, the best support network, the right friends around you, all of these things are so important to add up to that.
Absolutely. And you also talk about the importance of using gratitude a bit later in the book. Is that something that also contributes to this kind of shift in mindset? And how has gratitude helped you?
Yes. So I have found a great Tim Ferriss, who's a wonderful blogger, investor. He does all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Talks about a gratitude journal, and it's just sitting down each day. He speaks about doing free writing, which is a wonderful technique, but also just very simply writing a number of titles that you fill out every day. So the ones that I've listed in this book are I am. So like I am anxious, or I am stressed, or I am happy, or whatever it might be, fill in the emotion that you want to. And then it has a number of other stages, but also what you're grateful for. And what he encourages you to do, which is, I think, very powerful. It's not just grateful for the big things, but it could be grateful for, I don't know, the cup of tea you had this morning, or something so simple, so small. Because actually, I think, you recommended me the book, the 5 Regrets of the Dying.
Yes, one of my faves.
Yeah, and she talks about how often at the end of the life, people just wanted a cup of tea or a hug, or I don't know, a simple conversation. It wasn't the big stuff that they were grateful for. It was those very small moments of like humanity, or like little moments of kindness, that have the most profound difference.
Absolutely. And I love that 5-minute journal that Tim Ferriss uses, and have used it myself as well. And it's just a long process. I think it's really about consistency, but it really does change the way we see things and the way we feel about what's around us. Makes us so much more aware of all of the things that we have to be so thankful for. And what a beautiful way to start and end the day.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, exactly. Like a great bookmark to your day.
Yeah.
Bookend.
Yeah. And it's not like if you do it for yeah, exactly. Bookends. It's not as if you do it for a few days, you're going to feel completely different, but it's more about just rewiring your brain over time, which it really does do.
Yeah, and for me as well, what I like about it is that I just have a really short check-in. This doesn't take me long. This is not a kind of, even like a 15-minute process. For me, it takes just like a couple of minutes, but it's so nice to take that moment to acknowledge that and set myself up right, and then close off the day as well. Yeah, it's a very, very cool process. And actually, if ever I slip out of the habit of doing it, I always notice it. And I feel instantly relieved when I get back into it.
Yeah. Amazing. So I'm wondering, Agi, especially as you know, I'm writing my first book right now. And how was the process of writing the book for you? What were the highs and lows? How long did it take?
What were the highs and lows? Oh God, how long have you got? Have you got a stiff gin and tonic? It has been quite an interesting process. So I quit my role back in financial services. So I was having panic attacks in 2014. Kind of got myself a little bit more back on track. And then I resigned in 2015. And I pretty much started immediately writing, because I was like, I'm learning all this incredible stuff, and I want one place that I can return to so that I have everything in one place. Like, I'm not going to forget all these like amazing bits of knowledge and experience that I'm picking up. So draft 1 was so easy. It just spilled out of me onto the page, and I really loved it. I was so fired up. It was very clear. Everything kind of it felt very easy. And then I just totally got in the way of myself. And I spent the next few years having a lot of coaching, a lot of different things, and sitting on it, essentially. And then I finally got to this point when I thought 2 things. One, if someone else published this book, I'd be so frustrated that I hadn't done it. But secondly, if someone felt as crappy as I did, like, shame on me that I haven't made this available to them. Like, that person who can absolutely have like an easier, happier way forward. Like, it's kind of, I don't know, it's my responsibility almost to be able to give them that. And so yeah. I then basically decided I pretty much got it ready for self-publication. And then I thought, no, I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm going to try and see if I can get a publisher. Emailed a whole host of agents who essentially said that my social media following wasn't quite up to the reality TV stars that they're now taking on. So I had a lot of rejection. So Nikki, I'd encourage you to develop a very thick skin. And then was lucky I came across John Hunt Publishing, and they loved the manuscript and took it from there. So yeah.
Amazing. And I have heard that, unfortunately, publishers are only really looking for social media stars because they don't really know how to promote books digitally themselves. So what was different with your publisher?
I don't know. I think they're a bit more, they specialize in this kind of world of where Generation Panic sits. And I think they're just willing to take a shot on new authors. I don't know. I think they like what they read. Potluck.
Brilliant.
But yeah, happy to recommend you over.
Thank you. Yeah. So it was really a process, a long process, but in different phases where you just wrote everything down yourself and then came back to it and developed it over time.
Yeah, and just tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. I think the part of me that wanted to get it all kind of perfectly put together went into overdrive, and I wanted everything just to work.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, it has. So it paid off.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, so you've shared with us about this difficult time in financial services, and of course now you're coaching and an executive coach and my first coach. How did you get yourself out of that financial services world and that kind of, success that people reward you for, to really connect with what you truly wanted to do?
Oh, it was hard. So I ummed and ahed for a long time, but I think ultimately I really wasn't fundamentally happy. And I just thought, I'm going to still be working for these guys in years to come. And this is my time to go be brave and bold. So I decided to quit and try. I was like, I'm going to just take a year out and work out what's going to make me happy. And tried everything you can think of, from like ceramics to coding, financial statements to yoga, went motorcycling around the Himalayas. I mean, just like a crazy 6 months. And one of them was a coaching for business course with City University in London. And I just loved it. I used to sit there and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can't believe you can get paid for this. Like, how cool is that? And so from that moment, so back in 2015, I set up my coaching practice and have since gone on to train with CTI, well, predominantly CTI, and as an NLP practitioner alongside a number of other things. But built a coaching practice in London and now based in Singapore. So yeah, it's been a wonderful journey, and I feel so fortunate I get to coach the likes of you. I mean, my I don't know, I feel so lucky. I feel very, very grateful that I have found something that brings me so much joy and I love so much and feel so honored to do. Like, I mean, you must feel this now. It's just such a privilege, isn't it, to be in on those conversations and to be supporting these people be awesome.
Oh, absolutely. It's just the most rewarding thing I've ever experienced as well, to really help people unlock their potential and make big changes and take the reins on their life and live it more fully in whatever way that means for them, and find their version of success. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was actually just speaking with a client before you, and we haven't even worked together that long, 3 months, and he was like, it's just transformative. And it's like, yeah, it can be, and it should be. And life can be really good. Life can be really sweet. It's back to that perspective we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important that we all invest in ourselves, whether it's with coaches or therapists or retreats or whatever, but just to really give ourselves the opportunity to keep growing and working on ourselves.
Agreed. I mean, you're preaching to the right person. Preaching to the person. Well, I can't even remember what the phrase is, but yes.
Preaching to the
preaching
converted.
To the choir. That's it, preaching to the converted. Yeah.
So, Agi, what does personal success look like to you now, and how has this changed since your financial services days?
Wonderful question. And actually, my coach was asking this to me the other day. She was like, great, so what next? What's success for you now? And quite simply, I really feel in this wonderful sweet spot that I have a wonderful family, and well, the majority of the time, and doing this work that I love, and now generation panics out in the world. Like, success is kind of reached. Maybe I need to think about the next thing, but for right now, I feel in like a wonderful little bubble of like, actually things are pretty cool. And sure, I have things that are challenging or knock me off center or will kind of rip the rug from underneath me. But yeah, on the whole, personal success right now feels very lived and very kind of real, which is really nice to acknowledge and has taken a long time to get here.
That's so beautiful, because now is the only reality anyway.
Yes.
And we so often think of success as a destination that's just a little bit out of our reach. And I love hearing how you've arrived there. Wow. Gorgeous. Congratulations.
Who knows? Yeah, but Nikki will probably talk again in a week and I'll be like, whoa, where's that place gone? Take me back to the happy place.
Yeah, and there'll always be new things that come up, and there will be your next goals and the next things you do to stretch yourself. But to feel complete is an incredible place to be, and a place you can continue to grow from.
Yes. And I remember that from very clearly in my coach training, is that at the end of we worked together over 6 months for long weekends. And at the end of each session, they would say, we would have to complete. And you just had to say, I am complete. And you could kind of download whatever you wanted to, any reflections, a word, you could say absolutely nothing, but it always ended and wouldn't move on to the next person until you said, I am complete. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's lovely. Really lovely. So is there a key takeaway or message that you would like to share as we come to the end of our conversation?
Oh, what is my key message? Wherever you are is where you're meant to be, but there's probably ways out of there. And you can do it. And yeah, there's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, whatever challenges you're facing, whatever hardships are in your way, they are likely to become such an important part of you, even if you haven't realized it yet, in a glorious way. So stick with it. You can do it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Agi.
You are welcome.
Lastly, where's the best place for our listeners to find you online and also to get their hands on your book, Generation Panic?
Yes, so do connect with me online. My name's Agi Heale, and spelled AGI, which often HEALE, which often throws people. But yeah, do find me online. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the rest of it. And the book is available on, well, pretty much everywhere, like Amazon, Waterstones, Book Depository, Kindle, Audible. I recorded an audiobook, so if you want to listen to my voice drone on for 7 hours, then you can find it there. But yes, most places, and would love to hear from you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Agi. It's been amazing having you.
Oh, thanks so much, Nikki. Lovely to be here. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with the wonderful Agi. I love how she talks about the importance of listening to your body and how she experienced quite dramatically the power of her body's messages. Even when you might try to choose not to listen with your mind, your body is still going to send you those messages. It's easy for us to tell ourselves stories and rationalize what we're feeling based on the reality we want to be experiencing. But what is your body really telling you? And how can you tune into the more subtle messages of your body more clearly? Agi mentions the book which I recommended to her to read, The 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. You might have heard me talk about it before. This is one of my absolute favourites and one of the couple of books I have given as presents most to other people. It's not morbid, as the title may suggest, but shares the ways in which people reflect on their lives as they're coming to an end and the most important lessons that they have learnt, which always fall into the same themes. It's an absolute privilege to be able to read these lessons when contemplating how to live your life, and a hugely inspiring text. Let me know what you think on Instagram if you have a chance to read it. I'm also very inspired to hear about Agi's own book and how she's sharing the tools that helped her with anxiety with the world. I certainly found it useful, even not having suffered from anxiety myself. So make sure you grab yourself a copy of Generation Panic if you'd like to find out more about any of the techniques we discussed today and many, many more ways to address anxiety. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe now. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and short review. If you think people you know might benefit from listening to Going Conscious, please share it with them. I know I get much of my inspiration from podcasts which are shared with me. For all episodes, our library and more, visit goingconscious.com. Your support to spread this positive message of fulfillment and freedom means so much. As well as hosting Going Conscious, I help conscious entrepreneurs to transition and unleash their power and purpose with my transformation coaching and conscious brand consulting work. Discover more on Instagram @NikkiTrott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. I'd love to hear from you and to talk about your goals, questions, or how we can work together. And if I don't hear from you before then, see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Going